another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. Today we'll be taking a look at the most recent release as a part of the Big Finish monthly range of 2018. This time round is the final release from the 7th Doctor, Mel and Ace adventures for this year, and is of course the Quantum Possibility Engine, written by Guy Adams. Now this is a continuation story from the previous two adventures that we've had, including the Dispossessed, where we had a little bit of a theme or plot arc going on with Mel that was used at the very end of each story. I will be getting onto that in a little bit, but this is basically where all of those elements come together for one big final, including quite a throwback villain for Big Finish history, including Dogbolter, who was seen originally, I do believe, in a Big Finish story called The Maltese Penguin, of course featuring one of my favourite companions of all time, being Frobisher, the shape-shifting Whifferdale, but also became the companion of the 6th Doctor. So it is lovely to see Dogbolter back. It's nice to almost have a little bit of a old historical character from Big Finish's back catalogue once again in some audio adventures, and it will be great to see a few more of those older characters coming back in the future as well, including Frobisher, obviously, as I've been wanting now for many years. But first off, and as always, in the description below, I'll leave the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. It's currently out now. The recommended retail for the physical CD is $14.99 and the download version is $12.99. Naturally, if you buy it from the Big Finish website, you do get the download for free if you buy the physical edition, and also when you go onto the Big Finish website, you can check out the digital trailer, the story information, the casting information, and all of that as well. I do believe that if you're somebody that in fact buys these from other places other than Big Finish, it will become available after November 30th, 2018. So basically, if you want it quite soon, it's kind of exclusive to the Big Finish website up until then. Of course, as I mentioned previously, this episode is written by Guy Adams, it is directed by Jamie Anderson, the producer for this story is Nicholas Briggs, and the script editor is also Nicholas Briggs, and as per usual, the executive producers are Jason Haig-Ellery and also finally Nicholas Briggs. Firstly, going on to the actual plot arc sort of narrative for this story, which is something of which that will probably raise a few questions, because it's not exactly very often where we have a plot arc that is kind of extended through Big Finish monthly range stories, so I'm going to get it out of the way first, just in case you are wondering. Basically, there has been a little bit of a reference that has been used between the episodes Red Planets, The Dispossessed, and finally this story. Basically, some general knowledge and some context in case you want to go into this story without listening to those episodes. Actually, those two previous stories will cost around £30 together, and then you've got this release as well that will toss it up to around £45, and not everybody has £45. So basically giving you a little bit of a summary. Mel has a little bit of debt. Previously the Doctor thinks that he has covered that up and fixed it, however some of it has been left standing, and the debt in fact got bought out by Dogbolter, the current president of the solar system, and then that eventually leads to a little bit of corruption between Mel and Dogbolter, and that leads to Mel going on this mission kind of behind the Doctor's back in order to retrieve the TARDIS and give it to Dogbolter so he can then use the technology from Gallifrey in order to kind of probably increase his business and profits and things like that. And that is basically all that you need to know. I think you could very easily go into this story without actually listening to the previous ones, so I am quite happy with that. Also quite glad that the plot arc piece isn't exactly crucial to the episode and listening to the other stories, because this one is in fact a very good beginning story. I think that considering it is a monthly range episode, it is in fact rather easy to follow and thoroughly enjoyable as well. There is some great comedic moments, and I actually think that a lot of the scenes throughout the story do hop between different places, so you get a very nice narrative and a very nice variety of different scenes as well, which is very good. And yeah, generally I recommend this one, as I said, to a new listener. Moving on to the characters for this episode, of course starting off with the Doctor himself, the 7th Doctor as portrayed by Sylvester McCoy. He has been on a rather interesting streak of stories recently. I do feel that the 7th Doctor throughout the previous two episodes has been quite mysterious, but not necessarily the darker version of the 7th Doctor that we've seen in the later half of his era. I do think that certainly these stories have seen his Doctor have some rather loud and nice speeches. There is certainly a moment in this story where he is very sort of proud of who he is as he finally remembers who he is in the actual episode, because he does lose his memory, and you see him kind of granting a speech to the rest of the civilians on the planet below, which is a really nice scene. And I think that the 7th Doctor is is in fact a really enjoyable Doctor for the Big Finish format, because you can naturally tell he has a great relationship with his companions, but also at the same time, I think you can kind of tell that he has a grudge against Mel because of what she has done, the fact that she has gone behind the Doctor's back, but also at the same time, he kind of understands, because probably it will be something that he would do as well. He moment at the very end of this story where almost Ace questions what he is saying because he almost contradicts himself. So yeah, I do quite like that, and I think that the Seventh Doctor is certainly a great Doctor in the audio drama format, and I'm glad to see him have further adventures from just the television seasons that he got granted back in 1980. Moving on to the companions for this story, of course, have Sophie Aldred as Ace, and once again, she's a really enjoyable character, much like how she always is. Sophie Aldred does a very good job. This story, we see a slightly different version of her character, where she forgets her memory once again, much like the Doctor, and she in fact almost settles down with somebody and is pretty much married to them, which was incredibly unusual to in fact sort of experience, as you don't necessarily expect Ace to kind of settle down. So it was a nice sort of interpretation of her character. She did have some nice moments as well when she forgets her memory. She in fact becomes a police officer or warden and needs to kind of maintain a sort of nice behaviour throughout the rest of society, which is quite cool and something on which I kind of would see Ace doing, considering that she's come from a rather gangster background, I guess. She wants to kind of put herself on the right side of the law, I guess, maybe, so to speak. I don't particularly know, but moving on to Bonnie Langford as Mel, of course, the companion that got the Doctor and his friends into this entire mess within this story. She is a character that we see a slightly different side of in this episode, the fact that she's got into trouble in the past, and I still think that with Mel, there is this rather interesting side of her between Dragonfire, where she left the Doctor within the TV show, and then between that and A Life of Crime, where she then picked up with the 7th Doctor and Ace once again and went on a few more adventures. There is kind of a period in her life where she was with the guy from the Mysterious Planet in Dragonfire, I've forgotten his name, Savlon Glitz. A time period in her life when she was working alongside him, and I kind of feel like we are still yet to know absolutely everything that happened within that time, because certainly every so often we get to see this different version of Mel where we find out that she is in debt, she's got into trouble, she's almost being in trouble with the law as well, or at least the laws of the universe, which is quite interesting, and something that naturally when we first got introduced to Mel in Terror of the Vervoids, you won't quite expect a character to go on to do that. The episode also sees her actually do a little bit of ICT and computer stuff, which is of course her job and career. She has a lot of understanding in programming and computers, so it's nice to see that once again Big Finish are utilising that, much like how they did in the previous stories as well. So we move on to a character that I was really excited to see back. We have Shawn Karsten as Navon, which is in fact a character that those of you who listen to the Gallifrey series will be aware of him. He's basically a Gallifreyan political figure. He knows the Doctor, he's been on a few adventures with him in the past, and he comes into this story because he finds out there has been a little bit of unusual activity with a Type 40 TARDIS that previously belonged to the Doctor. They think that it has been stolen. Because Navon is a part of the Celestial Intervention Agency, he then needs to go and figure out what is going on, and of course ends up kind of being trapped within the story and almost becoming a reluctant companion of the Doctor. And I do love Navon. I've only listened to one Gallifrey box set, but within that series, it is in fact one of my favourite Big Finish box sets that were released, but I also liked him. I really sort of got along with his character. I found him quite funny, quite witty, but also at the same time had a mysterious side as well. And I like the fact that his relationship with the Doctor isn't necessarily a positive one, and I think that he did have some great moments throughout this story, such as when he lost his memory and kind of became a person who manufactures ovens of the lower end of what he can do, considering he is a very intelligent Gallifreyan sort of Time Lord and he is reduced to kind of very low-end jobs. It was quite funny to see that. Moving on to Toby Longworth as a president of the solar system, of course Dogbolter. As I say, it was lovely to see him back, and he's a really interesting character. He was really entertaining in the Maltese Penguin, and the same for this story as well. He had some great scenes, especially towards the early half of Mel. I love how money driven he is, and of course the fact that he has got this very high political position, and previously he has almost been a businessman, and you know, he's kind of everything relating to all of his decisions relate back to business and what is more money sufficient and saves money. And I think that generally sort of politics and businessmen don't really go together too well. It's kind of two contradictory things that are never really in a stable relationship, which, you know, we've seen that in current media and current affairs recently. But in Forrester as a Hob and Soldier robots, and we also have Jules Ji Jong as a Captain Regent of the Karasi. And yeah, I think that generally, Hobbs is a great character. He's an android, very funny. And also we have the Krasi sort of captain, as I said, played by Jules, who have a powerful female that is kind of trying to coax a war out of Dogbolter, and kind of she decides to threaten him and then threaten the whole solar system. This whole interplanetary war kind of brewing between the two parties, which is rather intriguing and different, and it was nice to kind of witness that unfold. However, we didn't really get to know much about the Krasi. I think they're kind of a character that we kind of knew they were going to invade, but we didn't know much about their backstory or anything like that, so it may be nice to maybe get a bit more context about them, because I kind of felt like that was missing. Now moving on to the actual narrative of the quantum possibility engine itself. I don't quite know where to start with this story because it has so many different components. I think that it's a very unusual episode where I never normally find myself saying a monthly range story that is rather sort of jam-packed with different ideas, but also at the same time I recommend it to the new listener because I think that Guy Adams does an excellent job of actually tying together all these different ideas, but also at the same time making it very easy to follow. And I think that this story has a great production team behind it, to be honest, because I think that the characters are all fun and really engaging, but also at the same time the plot behind it is also rather interesting, constantly keeps you guessing all the way throughout. And I think that every single moment when you could have a slightly dull scene, that is then kind of completely juxtaposed by a scene immediately after that that is a lot more upbeat, a lot more interesting, and as I said, constantly keeps your attention. I actually found that, considering that this episode is 2 hours long, much like the majority of monthly range stories, this episode actually flown by, which is very unusual. Sometimes, especially compared to the box set stories, they can be quite long-winded, but this episode did feel very big in its production because you had this idea of the whole solar system essentially near enough being at war with this other species. You have Dogbolter being the president of the universe, you have the TARDIS being stolen by Dogbolter, and using Gallifreyan technology in order to alter time and things like that. I had lots of different ideas, but all of them tied together really, really nicely. The episode starts off with Mel, in fact, taking over the TARDIS. She uses a little device, much like how we've seen in the Dispossessed, and she ends up giving the TARDIS to Dogbolter, and we have them signing the agreement at the very start of the story, which has some really interesting scenes where you almost see how desperate Mel is in order to get out of this situation. But oddly, at the same time, I didn't necessarily feel too sorry for her because I kind of felt like she's almost betrayed the Doctor's trust as well as Ace's, and has kind of tainted that relationship a little bit. And it will be interesting in the future to see where this relationship goes beyond this point. Will it be referenced again? Will Mel be forgiven? Who knows? I think that it is a rather interesting sort of concept to lead on from this, because we don't really have companion betrayals too often, I don't think, especially ones which are like long-term companions, such as Mel has been in several seasons now, and was quite a large companion of the 7th Doctor era, it must be said. She was, of course, the first companion for the 7th Doctor. After that, we then move on to Ace being separated from Mel, and then the Doctor and Navon ending up going off with Ace as well, as they end up being zapped by the equivalent of a rather psychotic droid into the equivalent of a digital system that has then sent the Doctor, Ace and Navon to Earth below. And basically Earth is a future version of Earth that has been altered by Dogbolter in order to be very futuristic, and we have this really snazzy looking version of London which has television screens absolutely everywhere, news bulletins, and we also have some great references to current day locations in London, such as there's a moment in this story where they refer to Covent Garden as Covent Garden Plaza or something like that, which I think is a really nice touch. And the best bit of the story for me is around this point where we see the 7th Doctor, Ace and Navon actually forget completely who they are. They have a whole new identity. We have this moment, as I mentioned earlier, where Ace essentially settles down with the equivalent of a newsreader or somebody who kind of posts the bulletins, and then we have the 7th Doctor wonderfully becoming a cleaner, which was honestly an absolutely inspired choice because he is an excellent mysterious character, and he is almost like that person that you see in different TV shows where you know that they have a low-end job. They're, say, a cleaner in a school, a caretaker or something like that, and they are kind of treated as a low member of society, but when you actually get to know them, They are incredibly intelligent, have specialities. It's almost like life hasn't just necessarily gone in the right direction for them. It's certainly the case for the Doctor in this story, because he becomes pretty much the cleaner in the laboratory of Navon, who is kind of the equivalent of somebody who makes kitchen supplies, which is really interesting to see these characters that we all know and have in fact experienced different stories with completely forget who they are, and then by the very end of the episode kind of all their paths cross and they realise who they are, and the Doctor has this excellent moment where he makes a speech to the rest of the people on the planet, and half of this story is set on Space Station 14, which is where we kind of have Dogbolter doing the majority of his kind of political slash business work. So we have him being the president of the solar system, but also at the same time he's trying to get business deals by flogging different bits of technology. And I think that what I like mostly about the Dogbolter plot is the fact that he has the idea to change history. That is why the episode is called the Quantum Possibility Engine, because they've basically incorporated technology with Gallifreyan technology, and then they've made the equivalent of a time machine that can kind of alter society. On this episode, it doesn't go completely big straight, where I think that sometimes when you have sort of time-changing stories where you have a moment in history that is being swapped out and altered, sometimes writers have the instant decision to go for the biggest moment in history almost immediately, like what happened if I change the outcome of the Battle of Hastings? What happens if the volcano in Pompeii doesn't erupt? Or what happens if the Big Bang didn't happen completely, or something like that, and kind of altering history from a very big scale. However, what I like in this episode is Dogbolter is very kind of intricate when it comes to changing of history and very subtly altering different things in order for the outcome to actually suit him, meaning that he gets better business deals, more profit, and generally everything works a little bit better in his universe. And you kind of see this version of Dogbolter that is very much an idealist, and everything must be right for him, everything must look nice, everything must literally be shiny and pretty and new. And I think that it is, we kind of see this character that you assume at the very start of the story is quite intelligent, but then almost after a while you automatically see flaws kind of cracking through the character, which is quite a nice little way to kind of intertwine throughout the story, whilst you have the different events going on as well, along with the Seventh Doctor forgetting his memory and things like that. The main flaw of this story is we don't really see much of a development on the front of the Krasi, which are of course the alien species that are wanting the technology from Dogbolter, and they want to take it by force by taking over the solar system. And we do see them invading very, very slowly. I kind of feel like their characters was something on which that we had a lot of throughout the episode. However, I didn't really feel like I learnt a lot about them. But that said, at the same time, would I have rather had just a substandard villain that wanted to invade and take over like every other substandard villain, or would I rather sort of sacrifice that and the lacking development there and have the interesting plot of the Seventh Doctor losing his memory along with Ace and Navin? I would certainly kind of support having more time for that rather than kind of having the development of the alien creatures. So it's kind of a positive and negative outweigh each other, kind of where it falls in one place, it kind of uplifts in the other. And I say, listen to the Dispossessed and Red Planets. I think that this episode is a really nice summary to that plot. I think that it wasn't too big to start with. It didn't really set out a big, massive, unachievable plot or anything like that. It was kind of really slow in the way that it revealed things and kind of came to a really nice sort of satisfying conclusion. It would be nice to see more of Dogbolter in the future, because I think that he certainly has a few more plot points that could be explored. That is the end of the Quantum Possibility Engine review. Of course, the final episode from the Big Finish main range of 2018 to feature the 7th Doctor, Mel and Ace. This is the final episode of the 7th Doctor trilogy. The next release, which is November's release, I can't believe we're in November already, near enough, an episode called The Warlock's Cross, which in fact is the continuation of the Blake Harrison series, which is a trilogy of stories that started off in the Heliax Rift with the 5th Doctor, then followed up with Hour of the Cybermen, and it basically has Lieutenant Daniel Hopkins in there as a member of UNIT, and that is a rather intriguing plot, so I guess I'll see you all in a month for that. Then we also have another 7th Doctor story to end off this series, which I do believe is one with Iris Wildthyme and Hex, if I remember rightly. So to finish off this year, considering it's Christmas, as a little bit of a treat, we do of course have a 6th Doctor story to end off the year. How perfect is that? It is a standalone 6th Doctor story, I do believe set in a rather cold climate, which would be very nice in Christmas. Christmassy. I can't wait for that. What a brilliant way to end off the year. That is that. I hope you've enjoyed this review of the Quantum Possibility Engine. If you have any questions about this release, then please do leave them in the description below, and I will reply to them at some point in the near future. And do stay tuned for more Doctor Who reviews in the future from many different areas, including audio dramas, book reviews, product reviews, and episode reviews, and much more. So yeah, thanks for watching. I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.